Spring 1944, Wrightfield, Ohio. Major G.E. Lundquist looks hard at the flight test notes from the captured FW-190 EB-1/4, and the numbers tell a story that might save thousands of American lives if he can make his commanders believe what he found. For 2 years, this German plane scared Allied pilots all over Europe. British flyers said a strange fighter with a round engine beat their Spitfires in every way except turning. It was 60 miles faster, it could roll 150 degrees a second, and its 420mm guns could tear apart a big bomber. With one short burst, American test pilots studied the captured plane. With careful science, Lundquist climbed in, thinking he would see German engineering magic. The first flight seemed to prove it. Great roll speed, easy on the ground, powerful guns, but when they pushed past 400 miles an hour, the plane fought back. The control stick grew heavy. The body shook hard, and it felt like fighting against nature itself. The German plane that ruled Europe's skies was not just fighting the Allies, it was also fighting its own pilots. The Spitfire's Merlin engine coughed twice, then gave its strong growl across the wet runway. At RAF Pembrey, Flight Lieutenant Derek Ward pulled down his goggles and moved toward the runway, just another normal patrol along the Welsh coast on this gray June morning in 1942. The radio buzzed with regular talk from control-guiding fighters to unknown planes that often were friends or empty sky. But Sergeant Bill Jeff in the tower lowered his binoculars with worry. Something looked off about the shape coming from the southeast. It did not match any friendly type. It looked too wide, too short, and its round, shiny engine cover flashed in the weak light. When it turned, Jeff saw the black German crosses on its wings. "My God," he said, grabbing the phone. "Jerry is landing here." The German fighter touched down smooth on Pembrey's main runway. The pilot did not know he had just handed the biggest secret of the war right to the British. Oberleutnant Armin Faber had been chasing a hurt Spitfire over the Bristol Channel when he lost his way. The Welsh coast looked like France from high up, and in the heat of battle, even good pilots made mistakes. By the time he knew it was wrong, it was already too late to climb away without getting shot by the fast-moving RAF fighters. Jeff ran across the field with only a flare gun in his hand, holding it tight as he reached the strange plane. The pilot had already stopped his engine and seemed ready to surrender. When Jeff climbed onto the wing, he came face to face with a young German officer, his pale blue eyes showing the deep tiredness that came from many months of war flying Faber lifted his hand slowly, his gloves still around the control stick of what British experts would soon call a Focke-Wulf 190 Anton III. For months, British Fighter Command had gotten scary reports from pilots who met a new German plane faster than anything. The Luftwaffe had more nimble than the Messerschmitt 109 and armed so heavy it could smash big bombers in seconds. At first, the intelligence people thought these were old French planes. The Germans reused maybe Curtiss P-36s, but the truth was worse. Germany had built a fighter that was better than Britain's best. When Group Captain Hugh Wilson studied Faber's plane at the Royal Aircraft Establishment Farnborough, the facts showed clear. This FW-190 had 420mm cannons in its wings, while the Spitfire Mark V had only 8 light machine guns. Its BMW 801 radial engine made 1,700 horsepower, giving it almost 60 miles per hour, more speed at many heights, and its roll rate was over 150 degrees. A second letting it twist and turn faster than even top Spitfire pilots could handle. The numbers showed a dark picture of air battles over Europe. British pilots had been fighting an enemy with huge hidden advantages. The strange German plane was not a captured rebuild. It was made from the start to win airfights and beat the Spitfire in almost everything except tight turning. But when British test pilots started flying Faber's captured plane, they found small problems that didn't fit. Its scary name, Wing Commander Humphrey Edwards Jones, felt odd shaking when flying fast, heavy control pressure and strange handling that showed the plane was harder to fly well than its numbers promised. The FW-190 was very advanced, but it needed top pilot skill to use it right. The test reports from Farnborough soon wrote down clear limits that war intelligence had missed once speed went past 400 miles an hour. Elevator control became increasingly heavy and needed strong arms to keep the plane steady while turning in combat. The great roll speed came with a price. It made the pilot work harder because every move needed quick, careful control and endless small fixes. The missing rudder trim made it worse, since the pilot had to press the rudder pedals non-stop during a fight, which made him tired very fast. These were not deadly flaws, but they showed small cracks in what looked like perfect German design. British pilots were learning that the FW-190's amazing power hid simple design trade-offs. While the Spitfire was built so an average pilot could fly it well, the German plane seemed built for only the best pilots to use its full power. The difference was not just about technology, it was about ideas showing how each side thought about air fighting and how that thinking would shape the war. As Faber's plane got more careful study, British engineers started to see patterns that helped them understand German airplane design. The FW-190 had smart answers to some battle problems, but those answers caused new ones that German pilots had learned to live with through tough training and experience. The question now for the Allied air forces was, could these weak spots be used in battle? And could American pilots with their own kind of training find problems that the British testers had missed? Major George Lundquist walked along the edge of Wright Field's secret aircraft yard, his breath turning white in the cool Ohio air of April 1944. In front of him sat EB-104, a Focke-Wulf 100T G3, brought over on a Liberty ship from Europe, carefully taken apart, packed with care, and shipped with full reports from British intelligence. It weighed 8,535 pounds with weights added to match 550 rounds of 20mm ammo, and it stood as the U.S. Army Air Force's most serious captured plane test, yet evaluation project so far. The invasion of Europe was only months away, and American P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs would soon meet these German fighters in huge air battles over France and Germany. Unlike the British, who needed quick facts for defense, the Americans had time to study things slowly and carefully. Lundquist's job was not only to learn why this plane was deadly, but to find how American pilots could beat it again and again. He walked around the plane's round front cowling, looking at the BMW 801 engine, built strong with a smart cooling system that handled its 1,750 horsepower. The 420mm cannons in the wings gave it power to destroy a big bomber with one short burst, and its wide landing gear showed it could move well on the ground. Every part of the FW-190 showed how skilled German engineers were and how much they knew about air fighting. The first flight tests proved what the British had said. Lundquist found it easy to move on the ground and simple to take off or land. The single-lever engine control made power easy to manage. Unlike the many levers and knobs in American planes, the most amazing thing was how fast it could roll. At 250 miles per hour, the FW-190 could roll 150 degrees a second, far faster than the P-47 that could only do 90 or 100. But when Lundquist tested it harder, The German plane started showing problems that battle reports had missed. At speeds over 400 miles an hour, the control stick got very heavy, and it took a lot of muscle to hold the plane. Steady during tight turns, the whole body began to shake and pass the shaking through the controls, making it harder to fly smoothly. Captain Ray White. Another test pilot in the program shared his notes with Lundquist after flying it himself. White also noticed that without rudder trim, the pilot had to keep steady pressure on the pedals all the time. During fights, quickly tire any pilot in a long dogfight. The elevator trim worked, but it moved too slow for quick changes when fast moves were needed. The biggest worry was how suddenly the plane could stall with almost no warning when pulled hard in a sharp turn. The American test pilots studied every problem, carefully writing down each limit with calm science instead of the quick war pressure the British had faced. The RAF had needed fast answers for defense, but the Americans had time to test every part of the FW-190's flight performance. This careful method showed things combat reports had missed. The plane's strong control at low speed came with poor control at high speed, and its huge gun power forced pilots to accept flying trade-offs that American design would never allow. Lundquist's reports started to show how German design thinking was different from American. The FW-190 was made for quick attacks and breakaways, the kind of fast hit-and-run style the German Luftwaffe used against bomber groups. Its fast roll and big guns made it deadly in short fights, but long battles showed weak spots that German pilots could only handle through great training and discipline. The biggest difference showed up when Americans tested its turning. The FW-190 could turn tighter than a P-47 when slow, but still had a wide turn compared to older fighters. Using its flaps helped a little but not enough to fix the trade-off between straight speed and long turnability. German flyers had learned to use its strong points and avoid turning fights, a tactic American planners were just starting to grasp. As spring turned to summer and D-Day came closer, the Wright field testing grew to include more captured planes. Each one told the same story: great power, but built in limits that German pilot training had learned to handle instead of fixing. The Americans were seeing that the feared FW-190 was not only a strong fighter, it was a different way of thinking about air war built into metal and parts. The lesson went beyond one plane. German designers built for expert pilots, while Americans were starting to build planes that helped average pilots do great with easy controls and smoother handling. The FW-190 required exceptional pilots to reach its best performance. While American fighters were built to make pilots stronger, not to test their limits, this difference in thinking mattered more than any single machine part. As Lundquist finished his reports for the commanders in Europe, he was not only writing about one plane's good and bad points, he was showing the deeper ideas that would decide whose way of air fighting would win over Nazi Germany. One foggy morning in October 1944, a freight train from New York rolled into Wright Field carrying what intelligence officers called the most valuable cargo of the whole European war. Fe-121, a Focke-Wulf 190D taken during Operation Bodenplatte, came off the rail car looking perfect. Unlike the damaged G3 that Lundquist had tested, this D model, called Dora, was the top of German fighter design. The plane the Luftwaffe bragged was the best in the world. First Lieutenant Charles A. Ross walked up to the D9 with the careful mindset that made American research the best among the Allies. While British testers looked for quick combat lessons and the Soviets focused on rough battle use, the Americans studied every detail of flight from start to finish. Ross's job was not just to see why the plane was dangerous, but to measure exactly how dangerous it was and where its limits began to fail. The D9's long nose held the Junkers Jumo 213 engine, making over 1,800 horsepower and promising even better performance than the earlier Anton models. The cockpit showed the usual German care for layout with all the controls placed in logical order and good outside view except for the small blind spot caused by the big nose. Ground tests showed the same fine engineering that had impressed Americans since Faber had landed. His FW-190, by mistake, 2 years before Ross's first flights, proved that the D9 earned its name as a strong air superiority fighter. Climb power was even better than the P-51 Mustang below 25,000 feet, and its top speed reached about 430 miles an hour at the best height. Its weapons were deadly, with two 13mm machine guns shooting through the propeller and two 20mm cannons in the wings. For trained German pilots, the D9 was the top level of normal fighter design. But when Ross pushed the plane harder through tough test flights, the same main problems seen in older models showed up again. Above 400 miles an hour, the controls grew heavy and hard to move, and it took real muscle to keep turning. The shaking in the tail that Lundqvist had found in the G3 was even worse here, showing it was a basic design flaw. Not just one plane's issue. Captain White, now the most experienced American pilot of captured planes, flew tests against U.S. fighters to find out everything. The German plane ruled at slow speed, with fast rolling and strong climbing. But when the fight got fast, its weak points showed, and American flying tactics could use them above 300. 25 miles per hour, the D9's aileron control slowed down, while the P-47 and P-51 still handled smoothly. Engineering study with the flight tests made the reason clear. The FW-190 used pushrod controls that worked great when slow, but caused bad shaking under high G-force. American engineers found that the wing shape made the rolling strong, but hurt high-speed balance, and the tail design that gave quick pitch changes made it hard to keep control in sharp moves. More captured planes came in late 1944, and all showed the same thing. An Anton 8 from a crash had the same control troubles, and a captured F-8 from the Mediterranean showed it wasn't just one batch or model the FW-190's way. The FW-190 handled showed it was built by choice, not by mistake or battle damage. Ross started matching American test results with reports from the British and Soviets, and found they had noticed the same limits, but dealt with them differently. The British used their data right away in battle-making fight plans that kept their Spitfires and Hurricanes where they were better than German planes. The Soviets were more direct, saying that captured D9s always lost practice fights with LA-5 fighters if the battle lasted too long. The meaning was clear. As Ross put the data together, German pilots had learned to fight, using what their planes did best while staying out of trouble when they couldn't handle more long turns or fast chases. Hit-and-run strikes on bombers made the most of the D9's strong climb and deadly guns while keeping away from fights that showed its control. Problems. German flight training focused on strict discipline, so pilots stayed inside the plane's best range. American pilots testing the same plane with their own habits quickly saw things the Germans just lived with, like no rudder trim, which meant constant foot pressure. German pilots thought that was normal, while Americans saw it as tiring. The slow elevator trim also felt wrong to Americans who liked fast control response, but Germans were trained to think ahead and plan, so they didn't need quick fixes. This showed a deeper cultural split about air combat. German design built planes that needed great pilots to use them, right, while the American idea was to make planes easy for many good pilots to fly well. As 1944 ended and the Allies ruled the skies over Europe, Ross's work on the FW-190's flaws gave vital knowledge for the last battles. The once feared German fighter that had scared Allied crews for years wasn't unbeatable. It was just made for a kind of war. America no longer had to fight quickly. Fatigue pilots during long fights, since the plane needed constant strength to control above 325 bt. While American fighters stayed smooth and easy to handle. Ross wrote his reports with calm, clear logic, turning the many combat guesses into solid, tested facts. His records showed that the FW-190's famous quick roll was lost completely once speed passed. 325 mm, while the American planes still answered their pilots easily, the result changed how Allied airmen thought about German skill. The Luftwaffe pilots had trained for sharp, fast moves and quick dives, but at higher speed, those tricks failed, making them fight in ways that tired them faster and cut their edge. The captured aircraft study at Wright Field had now flown more hours on German planes than any test group in history. Ross's small office overflowed with reports, charts, and notes, showing every detail of German power and weakness. The FW-190, once feared as unbeatable, was turning into proof that clever short-term ideas could not replace full strategy. The big jump came after Germany's desperate New Year attack on Allied airfields in Operation Bodenplatte, where over 400 planes were lost. Many landed, nearly whole, letting Americans fix and test them. Soon, Wright Field's hangars held the biggest enemy aircraft collection anywhere outside Germany. Dorney, the program chief, ordered flights day and night, and, as the war neared its end, American test. Pilots flew each captured plane with perfect order, writing down every limit. The FW-190D9, the Messerschmitt 109G, and the Junkers 88 Night Fighter were compared with U.S. models under calm, safe tests that removed all the mess of battle. The results shocked both sides because they showed that while the FW-190 stayed strong under 28,000 feet, it lost badly above that. Where bombers flew, the BMW and Junkers engines worked great low, but faded fast high up, letting P-47 and P-51 planes stay far stronger. Where the real war in the air was won, planes noticed at once that the main strengths of the FW-190 vanished when speed increased, and American fighters could use their better power to control every turn. The deep study that followed flight tests showed that German engineers had made planned trade-offs to gain short-range speed and roll, but lost safety and balance when fighting hard. The push rod system that gave sharp roll at low speed caused dangerous shaking under high G-turns, making tight combat risky. The wing shape built for quick rolls also made the wingtips stall early, so pilots had to fight the controls to stay level. These were not mistakes, but chosen limits, showing how German planners thought air war should be fought. Captain White tested captured Soviet planes for more insight, and a Lavochkin LA-5 taken from the Eastern Front easily outturned the FW-190 in long fights. Even though it was slower and rougher in build, the Russians had trained for different battle styles, and their plane designs fit those better, revealing holes in German ideas. The new lessons from these tests quietly changed. American air tactics squadrons were trained from data, not just from messy combat stories. P-47 pilots learned to fight at high speeds where their planes stayed steady and their engines strong, giving them power the Germans could not match. P-51 pilots were taught new ways to use the FW-190's weak control at altitude, forcing long turning fights the Germans could not handle. The biggest lesson came when analysts saw that German pilot training, though praised for excellence, had become a trap. Their best flyers had learned how to cover flaws that should not have existed at all. Their planes needed constant skill to stay safe, while American planes were being built to make ordinary pilots perform like experts and win through smart design instead of brute talent, marking the end of an evaluation that had turned fear into understanding the machines that once seemed unbeatable were now fully known, their secrets written down by calm hands that measured not myths, but facts. American test pilots had found that what German flyers once called normal skill was often just compensation for design flaws accepted. As unchangeable, this truth reached far beyond the shape of wings and engines. It showed two different ways of thinking about war and machines. Germany had built fighters that pushed the best pilots to their edge, chasing perfect tactical results. Even as factories and fuel supplies shrank, the United States had built planes that made average men strong through good balance. Clear controls and dependable design turning industrial power into air power as Allied troops crossed into Germany. And Luftwaffe power broke apart. Ross's notes told a simple story. Precision engineering alone could not win when strategy and production failed. The FW-190's sharp beauty hid blind spots that no pilot skill could fix, and those limits became the cracks through which the Allies saw victory by 1945, with the Reich falling and jet engines already changing aviation forever. The lessons from these captured planes pointed to the future. The war had proven that progress belonged not to those who built the most demanding machines, but to those who built the smartest ones. When Lieutenant Charles Ross finally set down his pen on September 23, 1946, his report closed the chapter on an era of flight defined by courage, skill, and the limits of perfection, marking the end of 15 months of careful and systematic testing that had removed the mystery around German aviation technology. The document carried the plain title performance test of FW-192D9 FE-121, but it meant something far greater. It was the complete technical autopsy of Nazi Germany's most feared fighter plane. Outside his office at Wright Field, the Ohio fields showed the golden shades of early autumn, a calm sight against the deep meaning of the data on his desk. The war had ended 4 months before, with Germany's unconditional surrender, changing the urgent wartime need for intelligence into careful records for history. Ross's last report would join thousands of similar technical papers in secret archives. Their war value had faded with victory, but their scientific worth stayed strong. The steady American method of studying enemy strength had given not only battlefield gains, but deep understanding of how engineering ideas connected to real success, which would shape aviation for many years. Colonel Harvey Dory walked through Wright Field hangars that held the biggest collection of German planes outside the fallen Reich. Dozens of captured fighters, bombers, and test types stood neatly lined up, their once feared looks softened by close study and the slow passing of time. The FW-192D9 that had once scared Allied airmen over Europe now acted as a teaching tool, its control flaws written down with exact science turning myth into a clear engineering story. The quiet peace after victory gave time for the reflection that wartime rush had not allowed. American test pilots had studied German planes with steady, careful methods that exposed both strengths and hidden flaws beneath stories and propaganda. The FW-190's strong flying ability had covered deep design trade-offs, showing wider mistakes in Germany's plan for industrial war. German skill in building strong machines could not hide those deeper errors in thinking. Precision and tactical optimization had been limited by resource shortages and design beliefs that American industrial strength could easily overcome through different methods facing the same technical problems. Captain Ray White, now moving from captured German fighters to early jet planes at Muroc Field, thought deeply about the larger meaning of his 3 years studying enemy aircraft. The American way of joining pilot and machine was completely different, from German thinking reaching far beyond small design details. Where Luftwaffe fighters needed expert pilots to get full performance, American builders were learning to make planes that helped regular pilots perform better, using smart cockpit design and easy handling shaped by large-scale training instead of elite skill. The captured aircraft program's biggest lesson wasn't found in blueprints or numbers, but in the thinking behind two opposite ideas of air combat. German engineers had focused on making single machines perfect for short-term tactical wins under limits of small factories and few materials. American design thinking was moving toward full systems that linked pilot training, aircraft power, and mass production to gain lasting strength across every battle type instead of just momentary skill advantages. Freeman Field's storage hangars took in most of the captured German planes as the testing program slowly ended, turning live intelligence tools into silent lessons for learning and history. The many FW-190 models that had been tested in detail joined hundreds of other captured aircraft standing in neat long lines under shelter. Their war value had faded, but their teaching worth stayed alive for future generations of engineers and air officers who would meet new problems needing the same calm and organized study. The shared knowledge from long, steady enemy aircraft testing went beyond just how each plane flew to include a deeper view of how technology linked to winning wars. American pilots and engineers learned that a plane's strong weapons meant little if pilot training, battle tactics, and production capacity were not all coordinated to keep advantages over long campaigns. Germany's idea of making superior machines that needed expert pilots failed against American strategies that used many well-built planes flown by ordinary pilots effectively. Ross's final technical reports went into secret archives shaping American aviation through the early jet age and beyond. Careful records of German design strengths and weaknesses laid the groundwork for building planes that helped pilots rather than demanded perfection, gave steady performance rather than momentary brilliance, and allowed mass production instead of relying on single powerful machines. These lessons guided American aircraft programs through the Cold War, when Soviet designs copied German technology and people. Moving from wartime urgency to peaceful study gave perspective on what the captured plane program had truly achieved beyond immediate intelligence. The Americans discovered that the fearsome reputation of German planes often hid basic flaws, and that skilled engineering could be limited by wrong strategic thinking. Systematic study could remove propaganda and show real strengths and weaknesses. These insights went beyond flying to show how a democratic industrial system could compete with authoritarian technology using different approaches to the same problems. By late 1946, most captured German planes had moved to museums or storage. Their active testing was done, but their historical value remained. The FW-190, that had once stood for German technological skill, now stood as proof of how American systematic study could turn enemy mystique into clear engineering knowledge. The gap between German and American aviation thinking wasn't just about machines, but about ideas, showing two different beliefs about how human skill and mechanical design should work together. Lessons that would shape military technology in the post-war world. The knowledge gained from 3 years of careful study of enemy planes would guide American aviation in future challenges, applying the same careful analysis to new technology and strategic problems, making sure that the lessons learned from breaking down German aviation myths would still help guide decisions long after the captured fighters had been placed in museums and storage.